Hello everyone and welcome back to another individual album review. This is the second individual album review that I have filmed today. I'm not sure if this is getting published today or not, but either way, it has been a while before that Converge review that I just did, since I did an individual album review of a new album, and now here I got another one. And today I'm talking about the third and most recent studio album from Olivia Rodrigo, You Seem Pretty Sad for a Girl So in Love. So I'm sure at this point you all know who Olivia Rodrigo is. But what you might not know is my personal opinions on her music, although I did review her sophomore album on my blog a few years ago, and while I have not read that review in a while, it probably hasn't aged well, even if my opinions on the album are about the same. Why do I say this? Well, because most of my reviews on my blog are kinda cringe for me to look at nowadays, and a lot of my opinions from then have changed, even if not on that specific album. Anyway, I really liked her debut album Sour from 2021, which I revisited in addition to her sophomore album recently to prepare for this review. And Sour absolutely has the feeling of a debut album, and I'd be lying if I said that I fully love the album as a whole, but it has a few great songs on it, and I don't mind the obvious influences on the album. Because it felt like Olivia was taking those influences and doing her own thing with it, where it very much felt like her album. Unfortunately, I did not like Guts nearly as much in 2023, and I unfortunately stand by that now, because while I think it's a decent album with some good songs on it, it definitely felt like a step down and didn't feel as unique as Sour did. And I'll talk a little bit more about Guts soon, but I was cautiously optimistic going into this new album. There were two singles dropped before this album, both of which I listened to when they came out. The first one being Drop Dead, which opens the album, and while it's not quite my favorite lead single she's released, that's still Driver's License, I do like it more than Vampire, which is a pretty good song itself, just not one of my favorites in her discography. Drop Dead seemed to be aiming for more of a psychedelic pop rock sound, and it had some pretty cool instrumentation, even if it felt like it could have gone a little more wild, but that hook is catchy enough to make me mostly look past any minor production nitpicks I might have. And I quite like the strings for the post-chorus, and Olivia's vocal delivery is quite strong, even if the production doesn't totally flatter her on this song. She sounds a little buried. But overall, it's a very good song, just not quite a great one in my opinion, and I was hoping this album would bring some stronger highlights than this, but it was a somewhat promising lead single. Then there was The Cure, and honestly, this is a very Cure-themed album, considering there's a song called The Cure, there's also a song that references a song by The Cure, and there's also a song featuring Robert Smith from The Cure. But the song called The Cure doesn't actually sound as much like a Cure song as it does like Everlong by the Foo Fighters, specifically the acoustic version of that song. And I'm just realizing now I've said the word Cure a lot. And I wasn't really a huge fan of this single when it came out, although it has grown on me since. I think it's got a pretty good hook, although I'm not a huge fan of the transition into the second verse, and the build at the end does not really hit as much as I think it's supposed to. So I didn't really know what to expect going into the album. I was hoping I would like it more than Guts, but I knew I should not set my expectations too high, and... Okay, honestly, on my first few listens, I found this to be extremely underwhelming. And I'm not going to say it isn't underwhelming or overrated, because I unfortunately think it is. I mean, I've seen the shocking amount of critical acclaim this has been getting, and personally, I don't fully understand why. But look, it's not quite as underwhelming to the same extent as I thought it was at first, and after many listens, I feel pretty confident saying that it's not a bad album at all, but it's also not one that really makes me think Olivia Rodrigo is going to put out a truly great album anytime soon. And I wouldn't even put Sour in that category as someone who thinks that that's her best album. And regarding my biggest critique of this album, if I had to describe it simply, well, it's not actually going to be that simple because I will need to explain myself here. The critique I'm going to make here is going to sound really unfair, and I promise I don't mean this in the way that it sounds. The album is too mainstream. Now, before you get upset, no, I'm not saying that the problem is that this album is popular, or that it's by a popular artist, or that it's having lots of chart success. Mainstream music can be great, and I have no problem admitting that. What I'm saying is that Olivia Rodrigo's two most recent albums have a similar problem to me of aiming for experimental pop, which I think would be a really interesting lane for Olivia, but instead of going all the way there, it feels like it's designed too much to appeal to a mainstream audience. And that's not to say that music with a mainstream sound can't be really good either, it's just that this album often feels caught between worlds, and it's something that I notice with Guts too. Sour may not have been the most technically perfect album, but I really liked how raw it felt, and the emotion really shines through on that album as a result. Look at a song like Enough for You. And it's also part of the reason why I think Driver's License is a great song. It did not feel overly polished like this album does. Now, there are moments where these blends of styles do kind of work. I think Drop Dead does a pretty good job of it, aside from the issues that I already mentioned, and there are other moments where it feels like there's more focus, like how Maggots for Brains really leans in on the melody and making a catchy pop rock song. And I do think Stupid Song connects the different parts of the song quite well, and is quite a well-produced track as well. Or if you want a completely different example, Less is the kind of ballad that I really liked about some of my favorite songs on Sour, and it's got some of my favorite vocals on the album. And on the topic of the vocals, I don't think Olivia is a bad singer at all. A lot of the time here, she can really bring a lot to these songs vocally, but then there are moments where she tries to play into the melodrama a bit more, and I'm not totally sure it works all the time. I mean, it's not like she totally embarrasses herself or anything, but compare it to someone like Lorde at her best, and it does not even come close. Part of the reason I think Melodrama is one of the best pop albums of the 2010s. But getting back on track, because I do not want to make this all about comparisons, some of the emotion here shines through, but again, because this album feels so over-polished, it doesn't feel as authentic as it probably should. I'm not saying that it isn't authentic, but the final product doesn't allow it to really feel that way as much as it should, if you ask me. But alright, I'm trying not to make this review too long, so I guess I may as well move on to talking about the lyrics now. And there are some moments that I really like. Look at a song like Less, where she's being broken up with by someone who cares about her and wants to see her take care of herself, and yet she's very vulnerable here about acknowledging how hard it is for her, and saying that she wishes this person loved her less so that they could still be together. Yeah, obviously it's not healthy, but it feels very honest, and considering the rawness of the instrumentation and vocal delivery, it leads to a pretty great song. Honestly, probably my favorite on the album. And it's also worth mentioning that the album is sort of divided into two parts. The first half being the Girl So In Love half, and the second half being more focused on You Seem Pretty Sad, which makes sense to represent the ups and downs and the roller coaster ride of love, and honestly, it's not something I really noticed until I read that it was intentional. And yeah, I guess it works here, but I just wish most of the songwriting was better. And again, there are moments that I like. She's got some clever lines here and there, like Most Alive I've Ever Been, but Kiss Me and I Might Drop Dead. And I think she can often capture a lot of the emotion quite well in the lyrics. But I also have my criticisms as well. I do think You plus Me equals The Heart Forever is a little bit awkward in its phrasing. Honestly, as soon as I saw the song title, I had a bad feeling about this one, and yeah, it's a bit cringe. Not only do I find the hook pretty underwhelming, it's trying to be this huge anthemic chorus, and yet it just falls flat, because I don't find the melody very interesting. But the biggest issue is that main line, You plus me equals a heart forever. It just feels so try-hard in the most cringe way, and I'm not here for it. I don't know, something about the whole song just bugs me, and it's hard to fully explain. I guess it's one of the examples here where the vocals aren't really working for me, because the silliness of a song like this is hard to pull off, and I don't think her vocals really fit this track. There's also Bagged, which is a pretty bland, mellow folk pop song that would be completely forgettable, but there is something that really bugs me here. Look, I'm pretty sure the song is supposed to be about her looking back at a past relationship and feeling like she tried too hard to get this person to dedicate more time to their relationship, and how empty it felt as a result. But I'm surprised more people are not talking about how problematic this sounds when she's talking about, I'll take what you're giving, but nothing's quite enough when I know that to get it I begged. You do realize what that sounds like, right? Yeah, it's not intended that way, at least I certainly hope not, but it still gives me an icky feeling every time I listen to this. And the song that I find really blatantly obnoxious is Expectations, and it's not mainly about the lyrics, but it is a factor. Yes, I can respect the concept of it, where she's raising her standards for romantic partners and not settling, and it's a good message on paper, but then why is she talking about this new man that she's gonna find in a couple months? Shouldn't the point be that you're not going to rush into anything? Not that you're just going to wait a few months and then magically that person you've been waiting for is just going to appear? A total prophecy? Yes, I'm probably overthinking this song, and I shouldn't take every line this literally, but it still doesn't work for me. And the bigger problem is the way the song sounds. For the most part, I prefer Olivia's ballads over her more rock-leaning songs, and this is yet another example where the buzzing synths are grating as hell, and vocally she is not at all convincing here. Good for her if she's raising her standards, but she just doesn't really show it here in the delivery, and it does not come across as authentic, even if it very well may be authentic. It just does not come across that way. And those guest vocals from producer Dan Nigro are pretty obnoxious too. She's got big expectations. And honestly, it makes the song feel less personal. The song is about her. Why do we need someone else repeating the exact same thing that she's saying? Isn't the whole point self-love? And lastly, about the lyrics, the wording, "I've got expectations," makes it sound like she's trying to manifest a relationship. Why are you expecting anything rather than just raising your standards? I feel like standards would have been a better word to use than expectations. And honestly, it's moments like this and reviews like this where I'm kind of glad that I don't have a larger audience than I do, because if I did, there would be a lot of people in my comment section getting mad at me who would say that I'm overthinking all of this, and I'm just going to be honest and say that I'm not totally loving this album. But I just want to be honest here, again, and as a fan of Olivia Rodrigo myself, I'm actually quite disappointed by this new album, and it's quite possibly her weakest to date, if you ask me. There's enough good songs for me to give it a 6 out of 10, but there are also some duds that really hold this back from being a lot better. And yes, I know this review might seem kind of rushed, and there's probably a lot of people who have a lot more to say about this album than I do, but I could have made this a mini review if I wanted to, and I chose not to, and instead to talk about it in at least a little bit more detail. So hopefully this gets across why I don't think this album is really all that great. I don't think it really lives up to the hype. Again, there's some good songs here, but as a full album, it's really underwhelming if you ask me. But again, feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'm happy to hear what your opinion is, and feel free to let me know what you thought of my review as well. You know, if you think there's something I missed or whatever, like, that's totally fine. I know some people might think I'm overthinking a lot of this, but again, I'm just telling you how I hear the album and why I like some parts of it and don't like other parts of it. And yeah, I think that's all I got to say for now. Thank you for watching. I will try and have more individual album reviews posted hopefully soon. And yeah, I think with that, thank you for watching. I will see you all later.